Baie welkom terug by 'n heerlike see-episode. Althea kuier met Mark Dixon wat 'n marine bioloog is. En hulle gesels 'n bietjie oor wat alles hier gebeur, spesifiek die Strandloper Projek, wat nogal baie interessant is. So waar verwag ons? Kom ons hoor waaroor het hulle gesels.
Hallo daar, dis weer tyd vir in en om en ek dink die hele land weet die winter is hier. Ons het vandag 'n pragtige dag hier in Sedgefield en by my kuier Maak. Hy is 'n marinebioloog hier in Sedgefield en hulle het 'n ding begin wat hulle noem die Strandloper Projek. Maak, baie dankie dat jy vandag tyd kon afstaan saam met ons. Ek wil eerstens graag net vir jou sê dankie en ons wil graag bietjie meer weet van jou. Hoe het Maak hier aangekom? Hoe het jy opgeëindig in Sedgefield?
Well, thanks very much for the opportunity, and it's a pleasure being here with you as well. I ended up here 31 years ago and had been deciding where to settle down and move. Had come down here and ended up doing some farming, so did proteas for export, some cash crops and rearing tollies. But I've always been involved in the environment. And so I ended up doing some environmental consultancies for CAMLA, for wind farms, and just in general around the area. So I did a lot of ornithological work on a lot of the wind farms in the area, in the eastern and western Cape, but always loved the ocean. That's my passion, and so I ended up going there.
You mentioned it became a thing when you're in the tourist industry now and you went take them into the sea en jy kyk na die seelewe en toe jy besef dat ons vissermanne gedra hulle nie so goed soos wat hulle moet nie en jy het al hierdie goed begin sien onder die water.
Yeah, you know, I think what happens is we've got a lot of fishing pressure. And you know, fishing has evolved over the last probably 8-9 decades, where it was an essential, people going for a meal, to now with social media and that it's become fun and games and more about the brag photo. There's been a lot of other impacts, but we had a couple of tours snorkeling in the rock pools here at Gerick's Point. And we had people, instead of coming out and enthusing about the marine life that they'd seen, complaining about the accumulation of snagged fishing tackle. And so when I'd been doing some work down in Antarctica with CAMLA, I got exposed to the term ghost fishing, which basically means any fishing tackle that gets lost or discarded and it continues performing the function it was designed for. It will catch marine fauna and they can't get away, no one's managing it, and they die. And certain types of fishing tackle, as those are dying, they then become bait, which attracts other marine fauna in, and they then get caught up in that. So it's this perpetual process. So most of the research has been done on commercial fishing, and I ended up considering now what happens with recreational fishing. So we pioneered the investigation into ghost fishing from recreational fishing tackle, and then from that we found lead poisoning, entanglements, and actual physical damage to the reef. So these are rocky reefs that are covered by marine fauna and invertebrates, and they get scraped off by the line when it's entangled there. So to date, you know, just on stats, we've now documented 13 species of fish that die from ghost fishing from recreational fishing gear, and we've documented 7 species of birds that forage along the intertidal zone and in the ocean that are getting caught by recreational fishing tackle, getting entangled, and then dying as a result of not being able to go away.
Before we get to Strandloper, do you have contact somehow with fishermen and people that do it as a sport to bring this information over to them, so when they go fishing they have a new way of looking at what to do and what not to do, or is that still a huge struggle?
You know, there's a lot of resources out there. So Ori has some really nice information managing that. Some of the fishing clubs are very good on doing that. There's also Two Oceans Aquarium. What we found with our research is that using social media is a great platform to share that information. We've had criticism sometimes with what we've shared, but you know,
at least they're reading.
At least they're reading. Yes.
Yeah, if they're arguing, then it means it's getting out there.
No, definitely. So from that perspective, the platform is really good, but it's one of those things you've got to work at perpetually
and all the time. And tell us about how Strandloper Projek, hoe het hy tot stand gekom en wat is die Strandloper Projek?
Well, let's start off with what it is. So it is a non-profit organization. So we registered as a non-profit organization, and we are a citizen science group of volunteers. So we're all volunteers at this stage. We haven't yet been able to attract funding that would make it, you know, more possible for interns. Our primary thing is looking at ghost fishing and the impact of recreational fishing. Then we also look at plastic pollution. We also do some marine mammal monitoring. So just before you arrived, I was busy scanning for marine mammals. And then we also look at some drone mapping of estuary mouths to look at how the sandbars form and what keeps the estuary mouth open, and what are the factors that contribute towards closing it. So we started in 2018, and it was just in response to some divers saying how dirty the reef was with lost and discarded fishing tackle. And so we went and did a cleanup at Gerick Point, and we went along 100 meters and we pulled out 64 sinkers and about 15 liters of monofilament. It all tumbled up, so you can't pull it apart to measure how many meters which would have been kilometers. Went back 1 month later and we pulled out 68 sinkers and about the same amount of monofilament. So we had a replenishment rate on a fixed zone. So we carried on doing that on a monthly basis. So that's how it started.
Okay. Mark, you mentioned expeditions. You want to fill us in a little more about that?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, when you're doing research in water nowadays, sadly, there's plastic everywhere. So we started expeditions to compare data of what we were finding on our dives. And that didn't go quite as planned, but what we did do is we documented plastic along the way. So we developed a series of surveys, of which Trashy 20 is one of our main surveys, and it quantifies and qualifies the type of plastics. So we've hiked now 1,200 kilometers from Pringle Bay to Cape Recife in Quebec, and we do about 200 kilometers to 250 kilometers every year, and we sample plastic along the entire route, and with our Trashy 20 every 5 kilometers. And this gives us an idea where and what types of plastics are along the coastline. So there are different zones where you get different types of plastics, and that's a lot to do with the urban settlements that you find in those regions. So it's a very interesting insight into our plastic pollution.
So do I understand correctly that what we find here isn't necessarily our plastic? It comes from far, it comes from everywhere. How do you...
No, so what our research has shown is everything that you find on the beach, bar 1 or 2 items, so about 90% is from inland.
Okay.
So it's flushing out when we have heavy rains like we had this week.
So it's our rivers that
So our rivers flush it out. But the drift is anywhere from a kilometer up to 60 kilometers or more. And so we've developed a forensic methodology that you can identify which is the culprit river or municipal infrastructure.
And is it bad?
It's bad, and it's getting worse.
In the 3 years or 4 years that you've been at it?
Well, we've started our second series, so we now are retracing everything we did in the first 5 years. And the idea is to see what is the difference. Is there improvement? Is it deterioration? And sadly, our first year, which was last year, we saw deterioration.
That is just sad news, and it means that we have to start taking care of our rubbish and our ocean. It's not a good place to dump it.
And that's, well, you know, it's not even that. There's a combination of factors. So municipal infrastructure, municipal services are a huge factor. But one of the biggest issues we've got in the garden route here is this population explosion with this immigration.
Of course.
And so infrastructure, municipal infrastructure and services
is choking.
Aren't enough for that. No one's looking at mitigation processes either, and that's the big thing. And that's where we have to go into the future.
I asked you earlier on, is that rock named? And you said, yes it is, because I've never been here, I have to admit.
Yes. Okay, well, how it happened is geology. So, yeah, that's alienite, so it's part of a fossil dune, and it's wind erosion that's formed that shape. But its official name is Lion Rock, so if you have a look at it, you can see it's got that line form.
You can absolutely see it, yeah.
But its local name is Gerick's Point, and Mr. Gerick was a land surveyor in the 1960s, and he used to fish there often, and when he was out in the countryside, he would relate to clients that he had fished there and what he had caught, and so it just became known as Gerick's Point.
Mark, well, then on behalf of everybody in the garden route, thank you. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for joining us today. En julle by die huis, ja, ons gaan almal bietjie moet wakker word met ons gemors en ons gaan moet saamwerk. Maar baie dankie vir Mark en sy team wat vir ons hier by die see dinge al begin doen. Vir julle by die huis, tot 'n volgende keer.